So I've been to Indiana for, well, several trials this year. We had another Daubert hearing in Monroe County. Darcy Fawcett was the prosecutor there. It was a family sort of sex-related crime, and the Daubert hearing went well. TrueAllele was admitted. We also had a really cool innocence DNA exoneration that I want to tell you about because it also shows what you can do with DNA when you can get exclusionary statistics and you can dissect out the DNA. This was up by Gary, Indiana, in Lake County, and this is Darryl Pinkins, who was exonerated this year. So in 1989, there were 5 men doing bump and rapes. First it was bumps, then it was bumps and robberies, then it was bumps and rapes, and they were getting increasingly vicious. Darryl Pinkins and 2 other men, Roosevelt Glenn and Mr. Durden, were misidentified based on some coveralls they'd had that were stolen from their car. In 1991, Mr. Pinkins was wrongfully convicted and sentenced, I think, to 65 years. And in 2001, Professor Fran Watson, who some of you may know from the university here, had some evidence developed by Cellmark, and 2 contributors were found who are not these men. But the court ruling in the PCRA was that 5 people were needed to account for all of the possible perpetrators, and so post-conviction was denied. So the task became to see if there was more than 2 contributors. The logic was you've got 2 unknown contributors, you've got the 3 defendants, that equals 5. So the DNA is not considered exculpatory. What's important to note is that the DNA evidence existed. What I'm going to tell you about briefly is nothing that was a new DNA test. It was just better interpretation 15 years later of the identical evidence that was available 15 years ago. First, there was a jacket from the victim. The laboratory separated the DNA into sperm and non-sperm. That's shown on the top and the bottom, the blue and the green. We'll call the victim's genotype V for victim. And then by looking at the major 90% component and the minor 10% component, the laboratory or a computer could pull out the major genotype, which we'll call J for jacket. So that was known at the time. What wasn't known was how to get exclusionary match statistics, which TrueAllele did. What a negative means when you're counting the number of zeros, it's 1 over the number. So if 6 is a million, negative 6 is 1 over a million. And that would be exclusionary as opposed to inclusionary. So here when comparison was made between the jacket major genotype from the mixture and Mr. Pinkins, the number was negative 18, which is 1 over a billion billion. So by eye, they said he wasn't there, but mathematically, objectively, we know he's not there. There was also a sweater. Lab did the same thing, separated out the mixture in the lab into sperm and non-sperm, and then through their interpretation, they looked at the sperm and they found a major component, about 80% of the sample, that we'll call S for sweater, and they could say, well, it's pretty definite, and there was also a minor component that they couldn't interpret. Now I'm adding a second row. J was for the jacket, S is for the sweater. We're still comparing with the victim, V, and Mr. Pinkins. And what we're seeing is the stat here is negative 15. That's the number of zeros. That's 1 over a quadrillion. So statistically, he's excluded. It's not him. So even though we've done fancier math, this was the state of knowledge 15 years ago. Later on, in another related case with a co-defendant, Roosevelt Glenn, a piece of hair evidence was found, which we'll call H. Oh, and I should mention today that today a judge signed a court order vacating Mr. Glenn's conviction based on the DNA evidence that you're hearing about right now. So that's news as of, I don't know, maybe 2 hours ago. Here's the third match table, and now we have J, jacket, S for sweater, and the third row is H for hair. Comparisons made with the victim. Mr. Pinkins is P, Roosevelt Glenn. It's not any of them, and the exclusionary stat shown in bold red in the second column of negative 18 to Mr. Pinkins is again excluding him with a stat of around 1 in a billion billion. That's the easy DNA. But we have another question, and the question is, are these evidence genotypes different? If they're all the same, we're not answering the PCR question. If they're all the same, we're not saying anything. So in TrueAllele, we can compare evidence with evidence, and we did. Down the diagonal in blue, That's the extent of match of something with itself, the 11, the 10, and the 10. We're not going to look at that. If you look off the diagonal, you'll see in the green numbers like 1 and 4. That's the number of zeros. 1 0 is 10, 4 zeros is 10,000. There's also a -2, which is 1 in 100. So we're finding some positive association between these genotypes. And the question is, are they the same genotype? Are they different genotypes? What's going on? Why? And when we first were looking at this a year or two ago, we thought they might be related. And that could account for the similarity. This is how similar they are. If you were to look at the third row, that's for D5 on the 5th chromosome. There are 15 different alleles, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. And you would expect to see genotypes that were just randomly picking from those 15 numbers. Instead, what the red is showing is that the jacket genotype is an 11 and 11. The green is showing that the sweater genotype, the major contributor, is an 11 and 11, and the hair is an 11 and 11. What a coincidence. They're all identical. If you go to the 4th row, you'll see there's a 10 and 11, and those genotypes are identical again. The red and the red is a 10 and 11. The green is a 10 and 11. The hair is a 10 and 11. They're not spread out. They're very, very similar with a few differences. So the question is, are they siblings? Are they parents? And we can do a kinship analysis in TrueAllele, which we did. I won't go into how we do it, but TrueAllele can look at missing people, like from mass disasters, the World Trade Center. It can also do paternity analysis. It can also work out the genotypes of brothers or siblings. And it did. And when we looked at that, now the rows are the sibling genotypes of the jacket, sweater, and hair evidence. We're comparing them with the jacket, sweater, and hair. And in green, you see numbers like 4.85, 5.08, 3.34. The 3, 4, and 5 means thousands, tens of thousands, and hundreds of thousands. That's consistent with siblings. That's the strength of match you'd expect to see. And because they all have a Y chromosome, they're males. And so scientifically, it's most likely that these 3 individuals are brothers. But there were no brothers amongst the defendants. So this was pretty compelling evidence where you have similar genotypes, but the differences show a family relationship. So now the left half of the table we've seen before. That's the strength of match to the victim, Pinkins and Glenn, keeping Pinkins in bold. And the right half of the table is just evidence to evidence to ensure that these are different genotypes. And we've already accounted for why those are positive numbers. They're brothers, most likely. The 4th genotype was obtained by looking at a 10% minor contributor, looking at 2 different experiments from the jacket together. In science, you can look at more than one thing at a time statistically to get more information from it. And that produced in the 4th row a new genotype with an exclusionary value of -8, less than 1 in a million. And looking on the right side, again, this is a new genotype. It's different from the other 4. It's not the same as J, S, or H. We also looked at a DNA from the jacket and the sweater together, and these are different genotypes. The first one, number 4, JJ from the jacket, and the jacket is shown in dark blue, and this new one is in light blue. And you can see that the genotype patterns are different. And that gave us a 5th row. And that's all the way in the bottom is JS for jacket sweater from a 5% contributor. And the number at the bottom is -5 point something, or roughly 1 in a million. So if you look at the second column for Mr. Pinkins, shown in bold, he's excluded from these 5 genotypes. And on the right part of the table, we see that these genotypes are different people. So these were the TrueAllele findings in the Pinkins case. And these are things that almost nothing but TrueAllele can actually do. TrueAllele is a very old program. We spent 10 years developing it, and we had the opportunity to process over 18,000 World Trade Center samples and develop kinship information from the 2,700 missing people. The World Trade Center really showed us how to build the system and do a large-scale project. So it's sort of old technology. It's been doing this for a while. It can compare evidence with evidence. A genotype's a genotype. It really doesn't care. There's nothing special about a reference. It can calculate exclusionary match statistics. something that actually the state probably never saw until this case. It can reveal a 5% minor mixture contributor, the two additional reliable genotypes are 5% and 10%. It can jointly analyze mixture data. In the World Trade Center, we'd have to look at up to 8 different burned remains simultaneously. So by comparison, looking at 2 wasn't that hard. And we were able to use kinship to show that 3 of the perpetrators were brothers. So we found 5 unidentified genotypes, and the defendants were not linked to the crime. Shouldn't we search CODIS? We've got these great 3 new profiles, and that's a problem. I know that Fran Watson on the defense side, innocence side, wanted to research it, and I understand, but I haven't spoken with him, that the prosecutor wanted to do this as well. But this is the most common call I get from prosecutors, police, defenders, innocence cases, foreign countries. Probably averages once a week. Some weeks there's more, sometimes not at all. And that is, you've gotten so much more information out of this profile. Can you search CODIS with it to find the true perpetrator? Wouldn't it be great to resolve all this after all this time has gone by? And the answer is yes, we can. And we have protocols to do it. We've written papers on it. It's easy to do. The problem is the FBI is not that, they don't share. And it's frustrating. I read an interview about a case we did in Canada maybe 2 years ago, and this sobbing mother is asking the reporter, don't they want to solve this case and find the killer of my child? Well, I guess not. So the question is, when you have much more reliable technologies that are extensively validated, why would a government agency stop a prosecutor from solving a crime and keep criminals out there? I don't know. I won't be talking about that more today, but it's a good discussion topic.